All right. Hello. Am I live?
You are live.
All right. So, how's everybody doing today? I'm here with um, Kristi Winters, because I did get some feedback on my real peer review video that I most recently done, including some from the people who run the Twitter account, and also Gary Edwards and some other. And I was coming together and saying, well, I'll address what I received, such as it was. But I wanted to bring an actual academic, an actual person who knows what they're talking about on. So that's why I brought my good friend Kristi. Kristi, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. I also want to say I remember it slightly differently. I think you posted one of the responses we're going to be dealing with tonight, and I went, "Would you like some help with that? Can I come on, please? I would love to talk about this. Can I talk about this? I would love to talk about this." So here we are. That's how I remember. I think you're being very gracious and saying, "I wanted some." Like, no. I was like, "Oh, please, let me in."
Well, either way, here we are.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward because, well, and for one thing, my original video, and I think that there was some confusion in the feedback that I got, wasn't necessarily this sort of wholesale support of different types of social science, because I don't really know. I'm no expert, and I'm not in a position where I can necessarily do that. It was really only to say, but I do know shit, a load of shit when it's being handed to me, Sorry, that's the way I consider real peer review to be. Like, I'm not in any way thinking that they're, even if, so to put it this way, even if um, social science and all of science was just a garbage, was just terrible, that still wouldn't make what real peer review does good. It's just not honest or forthright in any way. But now we can actually get into, qualitative methodology or different things like that, and some of the benefits of different ways of looking at data and information. So cool.
Yes, very cool. I'm a geek when it comes to this kind of stuff. I am happiest like when I get to talk about these things because I have very few people who will talk about these things with me. So yes. And if I may, before we start, I just want to say in my bag, I'm taking with me an article that I'm peer reviewing for a journal. I get asked probably about 4 times a year to do peer reviews. And it takes me usually, like, if you have to read the paper once and you read it again and you make some notes and then you have to do a response. And in total, it can take, well, I usually take anywhere from like 8 to 10 hours to write up a review. The purpose of peer review is for somebody who is also an expert in the field. In this case, the paper that I'm reviewing cites my own research. So that's always really gratifying. And it's also why I was probably asked to be a reviewer, because they want to say, well, are they representing your work accurately?
Right.
Or have you done other stuff that they've missed that they should know about? So it's a good system in that way. But my purpose is never to be like, even the worst papers, even papers that I put reject on, I always make an effort to tell them where they went wrong, how they could have done it better, and ways to improve for the next time they submit it. Because the other part of peer review is that it's not a one and done. Sometimes papers go to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different articles, and a whole new set of peer reviews have to be done, are met at every stage of that process. And so it is not, it is a process of peer review. And what is disappointing, in particular with an account that calls itself real peer review, is that they don't embody the spirit of peer review. And I wanted to just put that out there as a way to contextualize everything else we're going to talk about tonight.
All right. All right. So I'm trying to bring this up, and some of the stuff that I screenshot, when I try to bring it up, it comes up as just tiny. So that's
Oh, do you
Very
want me to do a
annoying.
backup version? Do you want to start with something and I'll try to bring up the same screen and maybe I can download it into a photo while you're talking and explaining it?
All right, so that's good. So now, okay, Naomi, she is one of the people who is on Twitter and in charge
Now,
of
at the moment, I have to say I'm not seeing your screen. Have you swapped over?
I haven't.
Oh, okay. Sorry. You were just making a reference to a name and I thought maybe it was supposed to be on screen and I had this moment of panic.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm gonna trust you to get the picture up.
Okay.
And it's the one where me tweeting out the video is at the head. So she came over and responded to my video, as it were, um, rather flippantly, and we had something of a tweet exchange. And I'm gonna have to say that you should be warned, people out there, that I can be a bitch. You know, if I think you're not dealing with me in good faith, I can be a little harsh to you sometimes. So for people who aren't aware of that and haven't seen me do that, because probably you haven't been on Twitter with me, then this might be a bit of a surprise, but hopefully it's okay. So let's see.
All right. So I managed to get a picture up, but I'm not sure if it's the one that you were talking about. But what I did is I just downloaded it and then it opens automatically in Photos.
Okay. Can you screen share?
So I'm waiting for it to come up.
Okay.
And right now it's not really wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Of course. So I'm going to try again. Do you want to, can you kind of read it out perhaps?
I can try to do that. So hang on. It's so tiny on even my screen.
I might have well, it won't help on the viewer's side of the screen, but no, for some reason it's not opening up correctly. So I'm going to try to open it like you. Sorry for the technical issues. We did try this in advance, but
we did.
Is it, okay, right. I think I see the right one. Let me screen share.
All right.
Okay. And do I have? It says I'm sharing.
Okay.
And can you see what's on my screen?
I can.
Okay.
Let's see. I don't know if it's on.
So it's from Nan Lee, right? And it starts with the line, "Here is a person with complaints."
Yep, that was just somebody, I don't know, tagging okay Naomi in, I think.
Yep. So then, okay, the OK account says, LOL. Is it text-to-speech narrating the video? Mona software, right? Having said that, my DMs are always open, so if there are specific complaints about specific articles being unfairly RPR'd, all it takes is dropping me a line. Then, oh yeah, do you want to speak to that, or should I keep going?
You can. I just want to say, you can usually tell if somebody's going to just start out with an insult,
right?
Where you're going.
Yeah.
So, but go ahead.
No, it's a good point. I mean, basically, they're not signaling that they're operating in good faith. They're basically coming into it defensive, and as we'll see, deflecting. So the first two lines, I have no clue what you're talking about. You write, if I were to DM you about every specific time y'all were unfair to an article, that would end up a full-time job. All right. I use specific examples, but only as examples as how you go about being right-wing hacks. And then you can probably see, oh, yeah, go ahead. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if they had come with a little bit more good faith, I might have responded with good faith. But, the way that they came in sort of saying, oh, by the way, your voice sounds awful, and, what have you. I was just like, oh, no. And the real problem, this is the issue. The problem with them is not that they occasionally get something wrong. It's their whole setup. It's the entire way they have of going about what they do. And, you know, it's real easy for them if somebody DMs them and has a problem, and they might take that down and it might make them look good. You know, like, oh, somebody came to us and said we were unfair and we took it down. But in the meantime, they're continuing to just put out more and more of their junk.
Right. So the occasional bone, as it were.
Right. And again, because they don't like to really go on record as to what their ideas are or what they really think about things or what their issues are with the things that they're tweeting about, it becomes very hard to tie them down. So it's really easy for them to say, oh, just come into our DMs, come into where it's private, where people can't see.
Right.
So that's my take.
I think that's a reasonable take. Right. So they go on to write, so you're saying that's your actual voice? LOL. Anyway, feel free to DM me if you have actual complaints to submit. Also, for the record, we usually don't do think pieces unless, of course, black anality grade crap gets published in peer-reviewed journals, now counts as such. I don't know what that phrase is that they used.
I assume that they, at some point I said in my video that they make no attempt to sort of differentiate the different things that they are critiquing. So one thing might be a study, a scientific study, and another thing might just be an article somebody wrote or sort of an opinion piece, what I call the think piece. So they're saying, well, we don't do think pieces. It's, well, you know, they do some things that I would call think pieces, but I don't think those are a technical term anyway with a hard definition. So fine, you know.
Yeah.
But they still ought to differentiate articles, studies, opinions, you know, those sort of things.
Yeah, I think so. It's well put. All right, so sorry, I was also thinking, I think the other ones have bigger text. So if you want me to read the smaller ones, but you can maybe read the big ones and then you'll be running the flow of the Hangout. Sure. Otherwise, you can be directing me to open, like, can you go ahead too? But no, go back. And not a problem. But I have a very big screen. Well, not a big screen, but it's a bigger than a laptop screen, as it were. It's like a.
All right. So
I have to get close to it, though, because even for me, this is tiny, tiny font.
The next few are small. Why did they come out so far? So small. That makes no sense to me. A smart person could figure out. All right, so I'm trying just to increase.
Oh, I tried to increase the size of the screen, and it just resized the window, and it kept the font the same. Okay. Aren't we having fun?
We are.
Okay, well, you know what? Let's see. The next one I have is about the patented peer review satire technique. Do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Let me screen share again. Okay. So you write, I got the patented at-real peer review satire technique. I will cherish this, lol. Several of the articles I highlighted were what you would call think pieces. As I mentioned, you make no attempt to qualify your emoji-rich discourse with your own definitions. So I don't know how I'm interpreting your tone.
Oh, just fine. I think I make myself clear.
Yes. All right. So then let's see. Oh, yes. No, we've already gone that direction. I think we're going this way.
So Twitter does get very complicated because they're sort of going back and forth. You know, Twitter threads, they're a real pain in the butt to keep track of. At some point, somebody asked them what was wrong. Somebody comes in and asks them, you know, well, what was wrong with the the thing about Truman Capote. Like, what was the issue there? You talk about it as, say, basically that it's crazy. What do you mean by that? What's the problem? Right.
Mm-hmm. Fair
And
question. If you're going to say something garbage, if someone goes, well, why?
yeah. So, and if I can,
I've got the one up. Yes, that one. In
okay.
fact, it does. Okay, you've got yours up.
No, I'll let you read. I'm sorry.
Okay, I don't want to read everything though. I'm supposed to be the guest.
I know.
That's okay.
I'm terrible.
No, it's fine. All right. Yes, that one. It does, in fact, decenter the human because it suggests the central relationship in this woman's life were with cats. Cats are not human. They are cats. Anything else I can explain for you, like you were a 5-year-old? How about you don't read grown-up stuff if you need everything written in the language of an I can read book?
All right. So yes, I'm not. Like I said, I can be a bitch.
Oh no! Well, what do you say? Yeah, and that's all right because snark is all right sometimes when it's appropriate.
Mm. So that's when they say something to the effect of, and I can probably get this one up.
Oh, about the School of Critical Analysis?
Yes.
Right. So here we go, right? This is them. Yeah. That's about the same school of critical analysis that claims Red Riding Hood is a story of sexual abuse. No reference provided. Difference between Peterson's Jungian nonsense and the article about Capote is that we at Real Peer Review so cruelly mocked its a few bit flips.
Yeah. I didn't know what they were talking about. The difference between Peterson's Jungian nonsense and the article about Capote that we at Real Peer Review so cruelly mocked is a few bit flips. I don't know what bit flips are.
Okay, all right, me neither.
So, but I didn't want to get into the weeds with them because I know when people are trying to drag me into the weeds. So I just said, "Oh, have you read the work? If you're saying that this is poor critical analysis, then what's yours?" I tend to agree with the author of the review about Capote. It's been a long time since I've read that short story, I will say, but my memory of it is that it's pretty much in line with what they were talking about. They talk about just a strange, eccentric woman who loved cats a lot and kept dead cats in her freezer because she loved them so much that she didn't ever want to be apart from them. And Capote seemed to me to be very sort of affectionate towards her. He liked her. When he calls the short story was called "A Lamp in a Window" because he compares her to that. He says she's radiant like a lamp in a window. So that was sort of the person who was writing the article's take on it, and that was sort of my take on it as I remember. So I say, well, what's yours? Like, if you're saying this is so crazy, here you go. And that's when they say, yeah, I'll see you in DMs.
Mm.
Like, I'll see you behind the scenes. I'm not going to tell you whether or not I read it, whether or not, whether or not I have any thoughts. Just DM me. Let's keep it private.
And also, you have to not only be able to just, you say, oh, I think that's bad because of the methods they use, but, within where is it located within its discipline? Like, what is it speaking to? And how do you know it's bad? I mean, if you just walk in and say it's bad, that's not actually peer review. It's just dismissing something without really engaging with it. So, and if you're going to do that, then you're not doing peer review. So don't say you're peer review. You're just contempt. That's it. You're the contempt account. But that's not peer review.
Right. And, like they'll say that they're a satire. But again, and we'll probably get into this more when we talk about Gary Edwards. I just don't I guess I have a higher standard for satire than some people do. And it's fine if you want to call it satire. I just think, the satire of a kid on a playground going, ha ha,
Yeah.
like that's not, to me, that's just not it. Like it needs to have a little more thought and intelligence. Right.
Yes, especially. Yes, when you're going to be taking on that as your moniker. So,
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I don't want to get too far ahead. So they basically said, meet you in DMs. And I said, no, thank you. You could come back and talk to me in public anytime.
Yes, where other people can see what you have to say.
Because we're not friends and we don't need to hang out. There's nothing private going on here.
Exactly.
Like I don't want to hear about your like personal relationships. Just come and let's talk about the issues you have with peer-reviewed journals and studies. I could tell you the issues I have with certain peer-reviewed studies and journals and, pay-for-play journals and the problems that they have and just the overall pressure on people, publish or perish, that it seems to me can do real harm, But in any case, we'll go on.
Okay. Now, in terms of images, do you think we've kind of summed up the DM exchange, or was there other screenshots? I think there's only one left, and it's pretty much all tiny, tiny type.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think we've got the important stuff. Might be me insulting them more. I don't know. Sorry.
Well, so what would you like to move on to now?
Let's go right on to Gary, and I can
let me see again. I'm going to try to download this and see whether I can open it and make it bigger, because this is a nightmare if we can't see it up close.
I can read it.
Okay. Well, we're going to be going through it sort of paragraph by paragraph, right?
So, right. So, and I'll make sure to link it so people know that I'm not reading it wrong.
Yes, yeah. Actually, you know what? I'm able, if you want to read it, I have the ability to put it on screen, and so when I talk, people will be able to look at the text, but they won't have to only look at the text.
Okay.
So I think we can do that. Maybe not. You go ahead. I'll work this out.
All right. So Gary Edwards let me know that he had made a small response, and he sent this to me via Twitter. So having seen this critical video by Curiosity, I went and checked out Real Peer Review for myself. My verdict is that her video is a rather poorly argued hit piece. She accuses Real Peer of cherry picking, but the examples she provides of its mistakes are far less representative of the bulk of Real Peer's output than its targets are of certain fields of study, of social study, where interpretism, autoethnography, critical theory, and the like are mistakenly advanced as credible research methods. So that's...
Okay. Yeah.
And again,
you go ahead and start. Sorry. Yeah, I was just like, I had to react.
So right away, it's just pure whataboutism. Like, okay, she was against Real Peer Review, but let me tell you what I don't like about the social sciences, why I think they're garbage. They're the real garbage here, So anyway, like, it's always good. I can respond to the thing about cherry picking. My point about Real Peer Review, they kind of have to cherry pick. You know what I mean? Because there are so many thousands upon thousands of articles that are published and studied, and social science is such a huge field, and they go from all over and pluck this over here and pluck that over here and pluck that. And that essentially that doesn't tell you anything, because that's just how, when you have such a huge field, right, to choose from, and you're just picking one or two things here and there, it's you have no way to know if that's representative or not, right? So that's kind of, and I find that based on when I went and looked at the things that they picked, like for instance, it seems to me that they really have a bug up their butt about gender, right?
Yes.
Just from going through, there's a lot of stuff about trans people. There's a lot, and either there's just an enormous amount of volume being put out about trans people, or they're picking those things and not other things, right?
Maybe they have a Google search sort of like program run, you know, where you can set your Google to search for certain topics to come up in like in the news, and perhaps they have certain keywords that they search for that pop up every time a new journal comes out, if its titles are published, or some other way of obviously finding their examples, right?
Right. And so if I go in, and a couple of times I did, I would go to the journal that they were picking from, right? And look at their other output. And a lot of times there were other things that could have as easily been picked up by them, but weren't, right? But these were things that wouldn't necessarily have to do with race or gender or feminism or, you know, et cetera, the things that they sort of just have a focus on, or just appear to have a focus on. So that was my part. Now, if you want to talk about his sort of his opinion on certain research methods, that's probably a good place for you to jump in.
Oh, right. Well, first, I remember watching the video, although a lot of things have happened in my life. And so I don't remember your video really being about mistakes. Is that, so when he says she provides of its mistakes, do you have am I misremembering, or is that kind of a weird way to characterize your critique?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't know what is or is not a mistake. That is an odd thing to say, because I just picked a bunch of things that were current that I could talk about that they had put out recently. But I could have gone and decided I was going to pick from, October of 2017 and gotten similar results. You know, I've sort of had my eye on these guys for a while. So, and I don't know if I don't think it is a mistake. You know, I don't think that if what you do is post, abstracts or little bits and pieces of links from articles and say, oh, this is stupid, this sounds stupid. Like, how is that a mistake? Like, yeah, probably all of them sound stupid. Like, some of the stuff that they put out there, especially if it's taken out of context, sounds pretty dumb. Like somebody talking, like some things I can think of back in the day was a woman talking about her relationship with her teddy bear, mentioning that in an article. And I can understand why people would say, well, that sounds dumb. But when you look at the journal that published her, it was sort of about consumerism and psychology. Like, that was their focus, the psychology of consumerism. So having something that someone bought for you as a child and developing a relationship with that object that was purchased, right? You could see how that would sort of fit in and would be something that they would be interested in, because that's what they do, right? And then you say, well, okay, so now I get that. But if you just sort of take it and don't think about it as being what they're trying to talk about and what they're trying to study, like how children can have these sort of relationships with things that are inanimate objects. They're just products. They're things that are bought off a shelf. And what does that mean? And does it mean anything, you know? So, but that's,
But yeah,
it's not a mistake.
Yeah. And this is, yeah, and I'm glad you explained that, because look at sort of the way he shifts the goalpost here, or he does this sort of sleight of hand, right? What he says is, she accuses real peer review of cherry picking, but the example she provides of its mistakes, which is not what you did, are far less representative of the bulk of peer review's output than its targets are of certain field of social study. So what he's saying here is, you said you've pointed out some of their mistakes, but they make far fewer mistakes than the fields they're critiquing. But the thing is that that's never been the point you were trying to make. So he's strawmanning you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a mistake. It's, I'm sure, completely intentional. Like, I have no reason to believe that this isn't, that this thing that they do so often is just, it's just what they do, you know?
Right. Which means, you know, how is you pointing out them doing what they do, your example is less representative of the bulk of their output. That is their output.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of point out that little way that he moved the concepts so that he could actually turn it into a critique of the social sciences rather than actually engaging with what you were pointing out.
Oh yeah, he really doesn't engage at all with the arguments about real peer review. It's almost all of this is about his feelings that he doesn't like social sciences. You know, damn Marxists, commies, pinkos. No, I'm just teasing that. He doesn't call them commie pinkos, but you know what I mean.
Right. And, you know, when he also, to mention the methods thing here, now I did a little, I sort of read about interpretivism, but basically it slid off my brain because I was focused on quants and qual when I was doing my PhD. So I can speak a little bit more to ethnography, a little bit less to critical theory. But autoethnography, so an ethnography is when you live among people and you engage in the things that they do. So you can do an ethnographic study, like I think someone was doing an ethnography of being a member of parliament, and she went into the office and she actually worked in the offices and went around with the MP for a couple different offices from different parties. And they know who you are. They're fine with you being there. They let you into the meetings that they want you to. They let you look at documents they want to. It's all with consent and all of the research ethics. But the point is to have someone living or sort of being on the ground, observing things that people might not be paying attention to, like how do offices structure the assigned roles differently? You know, is there some kind of pattern that you see or something not? Or how meetings and situations are handled in different offices? Who has power and how is that power exercised? How is the MP treated? All these sorts of things you do by observing, right? But there's also a process where you're talking about your experience as a legislative aide, right? What's it like to handle constituent complaints? What's it like to sit through committee meetings, right? And autoethnography is a way for you as a researcher to write down your own experiences of the thing you're studying. And part of that can be to document the data as research. Part of it might just to be so that when you have notes later on, you remember what you were thinking at the time, or in other ways. So it can be its own independent kind of piece of research, but it also is useful for studying how people operate in their own environments, right? And obviously, when you have a researcher, there's always a chance that the researcher effect, the people will act slightly differently. But eventually, if you spend enough time, a lot of people will kind of drop their formality and just start treating you like one of the people, and that can then that establishment of trust can provide better and more accurate data. And that's the point of even ethnography or critical theory. It's to try to understand the world better, and so you might not agree with the methods, but you can't just sort of dismiss them all out of hand as if they have no value to anyone at any time, anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, and autoethnography is, let's see, it is a little more, it's not just like writing in a diary and sharing it, which even people writing in diaries, there's a reason historians love to find old diaries, right?
Mhm.
Because they give you some really interesting perspectives and information. I read an entire book that was just a diary or a journal of a medieval woman who was sort of traveling around. And people love having that. People love having old letters or things like that because it gives you a different way to look at things, right? Human experience from sort of an inside perspective. And but autoethnography is more structured than that. It is more um, specific, more focused, but it still allows for some of that richness of detail to come through. And I could see, like, look, you can go through, and if it turns out that autoethnography doesn't produce anything great, that will be figured out, right?
Mhm. A poor
But
method will get left behind for better methods.
right, what's um, what's happening though, from what I understand from people who were responding in my comment sections, I had people who are social scientists or who are studying these things, sort of throwing it in. What's happening is that autoethnography is pointing the way towards interesting avenues of research that can then be more generalized, that can then be, you can then take it and make a larger survey or a larger study that focuses on more people. So one woman talking about her teddy bear is not particularly generalizable, though it's, you know, it may be interesting that she may have interesting insights, but somebody can look at that and then say, well, we could do a study on the different kinds of toys that children respond to. And from there, we can start to look at why they respond to, you know, maybe teddy bears more than teddy dogs. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah,
You know.
and it's not as if people do research and then the data just gets, well, sometimes, and sadly, there are data graveyards where things aren't used anymore. But there's also secondary data analysis. I think that I remember giving an example of interviews that were conducted with immigrant women about their experiences working as immigrant women, like first generation in the UK. And somebody else later came along and wanted to read that from a different, like from a different theoretical framework. So they were able to take data that was captured that they would never have had the chance to. It was anonymized and then made available for other researchers to use. So just because you don't like that particular study, there might be another researcher out there who will find that particularly interesting in the context of something else they are doing. And there was also a point I wanted to make about autoethnography. Oh, and this is again, this is a divide between qual and quants, although you can be mixed method and recognize why both exist. And that is, autoethnography acknowledges the role that the researcher is there and watching and in some ways co-producing the things, they're interacting with people, right? So autoethnography from a research point of view, like a research diary, which again, you could publish, it acknowledges that you are a person and you are part of the process. Whereas if you think about experimental data, it's always done from like this, oh, there's nobody doing this. It's just sort of a voice out there speaking truth. And when you're dealing with people who use language and relationships and all different ways of organizing the way we interact with each other, when you're a researcher and talking to people, you have to acknowledge that role. And I think that's a very valuable form of self-reflection that qualitative research uses, because although people in the survey industry are aware of wording effects, they don't give us a whole explanation of why they picked this word or that word when they were asking about this question and what, so they just sort of put it out there and then report the results. And I do think that it is good for researchers to think about the ways that our interactions with people that we want information from in the form of data to study, they're people. And that's actually a feminist critique of the sort of the more scientific, natural, the way of doing social sciences basically taking it in whole and trying to dump it onto social science without really taking into account the human beings are involved.
And they do have an effect. I mean, there's no, um, I think my favorite example is, the sperm meets the egg, right? We've all heard about the sperm and it goes to the egg and then there's a baby and it's a miracle. It's wonderful. But most people think of it, and most people who were writing books about it and talking about it, as the sperm is sort of the active agent, right? It's going and it's going out there. It's going to get that egg. Yeah. But in fact, what's happening is the egg is through various chemical processes sucking it in. It's the more active agent there in many ways. And people knew this. They've known this for decades, but the imagination that we still have is that it's the egg just sits there like hovering, being a big egg, and just waiting.
Just waiting to be rescued by a sperm.
Waiting for, it's a damsel in distress in the tower of your womb, and charge incoming.
Here I am.
That's still sort of what we think about, right? And that's the way that even scientists who knew better were kind of writing about it. It was in the language they used. It was in the way they described what was happening, right? And that's been there. That's been a problem for a long time. People treating early geneticists love to talk about women as the basket, as if they had no genetic material that they sort of put forward. It was all the men. The men had all the genes, and the women were just there. Like, and yet somehow children sometimes look like their mother. It's weird. So things that people should know, right? They don't always know. And it's important for scientists to understand their own biases, to understand how they can impact the studies that they're doing. That's why we have like double-blind studies, because we're trying to minimize that. But you'll never perfectly get it unless, I don't know, maybe we'll start having robots do all our studies. I don't know. But for right now, while humans are doing it, humans are there, and they're the ones who are going to write about it, and they're the ones that are going to talk about it and communicate it to other humans. And it's never going to be this pure, pristine process.
Right. Yeah, it's an ongoing thing. And the fact is that even understanding that that's a process we've gone through, is a form of analysis that doesn't require quants. It's looking back at patterns of behavior and looking at how people use language and the norms of that language that they were drawing on to sort of set up how the people thought about the world, right? So again, I mean, I think, this is, you can have a critique, but you can't, this is what I wanted to say. Not every piece of autoethnography is a fantastic piece of work. Just like with everything else in life, it ranges on a scale from, there's some really great stuff, some amazing things, and then there's some really like, how did that ever get published kind of things, but that you can find that in literally every single field. This isn't unique to the social sciences, and certainly not the ones on their, I don't like list. And so, again, if the purpose of the research is to include the impact of being in that culture on the researcher coming from a Western perspective, to try to make a link to the audience about maybe frameworks that they understand, instead of just putting it into some sort of vague, neutral, ethereal third person. You actually write in the first person, you talk about your experiences in the first person. If that's the right way to collect the data, why would you just say, no, that's going to be invalid? I don't understand. I just don't understand that.
I don't know. I think it is, what do they call it? Scientism. This idea that there is this pure rationality of science out there. And anything that sort of takes away from this this idea of this pure creature of ours, this beautiful scientific method that must be hard science, because you could never, like, there's so many things that you could never study with if you only went with this sort of purist model. So many things you just couldn't even look at or talk about, right? It's just not like that, right?
All right, we've gotten through one paragraph.
Oh boy, let's go on. Yeah, we probably should do at least two. All right.
Probably, yes.
She also accuses real Peer of low sarcasm rather than genuine satire, of lacking the well-informed irony necessary to graduate from the one to the other, of itself having no commitment to epistemic quality. However, it is clear, both by the nature of the faulty pieces that peer review selects and by the unusually high proportion of STEM professionals among its followers, that real Peer's use of irony is informed by well-established epistemic principles, and that is the tragedy in this drama, and that the tragedy in this drama comes from researchers who lack these principles but nevertheless feel qualified to proclaim themselves scientists, or at least as contributors to knowledge of some sort.
Okay, you want to start? All right.
The thing that
should we start? Yeah, with the first sentence. Just
all right,
and just contextualize this with the interaction that we set up at the beginning. And he's going to actually try to defend these guys as having high levels of sarcasm.
Yeah, this is some good stuff. That's your real voice, lol. You know.
Using inside lingo that apparently they think is funny, but most people would be like, "What's a flip bit?"
All right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna bring up.
You putting something on your screen? We're not gonna look at Gary's.
We're not gonna look at Gary's for a minute.
Okay.
So I'm gonna. Let's see. I am just going to go through and just show you some of their recent output. I'm not going to hang on.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm just showing my screen, showing you. So basically, no matter what I do, your avatar's on the screen.
All right. So.
Yeah.
All right. Can people see it? Let me know.
I can see it, and I'm the only one who matters.
All right.
I'm channeling a little Kevin here.
So the first one we've got up, they retweeted somebody else about revenge porn. Then they have something, teaching autoethnographies for radical healing. That's all they have to say about this paper that they're looking at.
All right, now just put this in context of what we've talked about, the purpose of ethnography, the things that you can glean from it, and then just the fact that they're going to go radical healing and autoethnography.
That is satirical genius. Okay. Research as easy as child's play, literally, because they're, I don't know, they're looking at children, listening to children's voices. So,
all right, I think this is about, like, sort of, I want to say, a comportment of children toward stuff on the environment, because I picked up on this one too. So should I just read it out?
Go for it.
All right. Well, actually, no, I think is then you have to lock onto your screen, because otherwise people will see me when I'm reading. So if you just hit me in the bottom right-hand corner, and so that there's a white frame around me.
Okay. I will try to do that.
Yeah, that's perfect. I can see you. I can see you.
Hi. Right. Don't make fun of me. I'm terrible.
Oh no! Now you know what I did is God, I'm an idiot. I was so distracted. Hang on. All I've done is now show your screen, because you're you have to put yourself out of the way. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Right. Children, young people are often positioned in the next generation of leaders in whom the public imagines or expects to overcome the legacy of climate and environmental inaction, increasing increasingly analysis of progress in environmental education independently identify the need for researchers and teachers to, quote, listen to children's voices, unquote. In this paper, we argue that climate change education presents a significant platform not only for youth voices, but also for a genuine activation of children's political agencies in schools, universities, and the public domain. In doing so, we draw upon the government-funded project Climate Change Plus Me, which has involved working with 135 children and young people from across northern New South Wales, Australia, as co-researchers, investigating young people's voices in climate change. We conclude that climate change education can open up an entirely new field of educational experiences and inquiry when it is inclusive of and led by young people. So this is something that I know from my own experiences like teaching. If you get people in a room and you talk at them, they're going to fade out. So what you need to do is get them involved and give them some ownership of what they're learning about, or how, kind of like give them a bunch of top topics to pick from and then let them choose the one they want to and then do them all, obviously. But that idea of participation and taking on the sense of agency that could maybe translate into better citizens engaging in environmental issues in the future. Wow, that's terrible. And you can unlock hilarious. Me now.
Okay. All right. Guys, don't make fun of me when I go through.
You're doing perfect. You're not faster than me.
All right. Let's go down another one. That's somebody else they retweeted a couple times about. All right. So neutral fella. They're showing, and I'll show you the next one down because I saw this earlier. Yikes.
Wow, and that's so profound.
The author is a professor of education. So this is about some guy named Wade Au. I don't know how to pronounce that. He is a Marxist educator. Like very blatantly. He wrote a book.
I've fainted. Fainted at the idea of a Marxist educator. I'm sorry. I'm just going to need to fan myself here in the corner for a little bit.
Yeah. And he wrote a book, and the book had chapters.
Oh, imagine that.
And just incredible. And it had reviews.
Could you scroll up a little bit? Because there was an interesting chapter for me that I saw, actually. Chapter 7, Curriculum to Change the World, Developing a Marxist Feminist Standpoint in the Politics of Knowledge.
Yeah, so,
yeah. A race and class political economy of neoliberal education reform. Wow. Imagine that. Economic analysis.
Yeah.
Intersectional, which is how people experience the world.
and they're making fun of him because he's not neutral, but he says he's not neutral. Like, did anybody miss the part where he said Marxist education?
Like, what if he was like a specialist on Kant and he did a Kantian education? Would they be falling over themselves at that?
Like, I don't know.
Last time I checked, like, Marx is not a fringe thinker. He came up with some pretty fundamental economic ideas that we use, and he will be part of economic theory for as long as we have it. So I don't know what yikes is supposed to be. Oh yeah, neutral fellow, right? Again, you don't always have to be, you don't have to be a bot to write a book. You can come from a perspective, especially if you're open and upfront about it, as we saw in ethnography. What's a problem is when you try to speak from a position of authority and a sort of third-person voice when you actually are inserting yourself into the text.
Yeah, I mean, there are libertarian professors. There are all different kinds of professors out there, and they write books about their passions and interests, and that's okay. Like, even someone like Jordan Peterson, I haven't seen many people saying he should not be a professor, or he should be stripped of his, accolades as a professor or something. Or it's, there's some people who I know who went to his school and didn't feel like they were comfortable working with him, especially after he started talking about how he was going to set up lists and check on all the Marxist feminists out there and all the, So I understand that, but there aren't necessarily people who are saying because he has a political bias, we should just get rid of him, like for that in and of itself, right?
And also, I don't know what this idea of neutral is, right? I mean, if he has a specialty. Now, this is also the thing is the phrase neutral fella frames the way that you read the chapters, or maybe you don't even read them, you just move on. But if you look at them, I mean, he says, I am my relations, becoming a Marxist educator. So that's how he got involved and he got his expertise and what motivated him to do it. And then he goes on to say, defining and defending Marxist dialectical materialism. And then he's doing analysis, capitalist inequality in schools. And he's talking about the issues of Marxism, neo-Marxism, and the dialectics of educational reproduction and race and class and political economy. I mean, it's not like this is how I feel on this topic. And this is how, I mean, not from the title, not from the things that they've given. He's just saying, I'm coming from this perspective. So why should we expect every person to be neutral? It just seems to frame it in a way that I don't actually see a lot of, say, bias in here, other than in maybe the first chapter, which is perhaps just meant to give you some context of where this person is coming from.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, no, we can speculate, but I'm just pointing it out as a critique of the way that they frame things. Because you see their words first. They're framing these tweets. It's a media studies, technique. We all know it. So yeah, ever deep. Yikes.
And that is apparently for the highlighted portion. Wayne Au, I'm not saying that right, shows how Marx's method has guided his path-breaking research on the racial politics of education policy and his work as an activist and organizer for educational justice. Well, thank God Black people don't have any problems in the education system. There's no issues there. Like, come on, people.
Sounds like he's really very well embedded in the community. He's got an expertise, and he's doing things actively in society and has a perspective on public policy.
Yeah.
How dare he?
I know, that's shocking. He's a professor of education. Those are supposed to be neutral people who never work for other people to be educated better.
And it's not a Marxist education primer, It's not like this is a book. This is a pretty high level book here. But anyway, we're gonna.
I'm starting to think I want to read this book actually.
Yeah, I know. Like especially that chapter on standpoint.
Yeah, interesting.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, Canadian dollars. Oh, it was the funding, the one about the environment we looked at was actually like a government funded program because they care about the future of the country. I mean, and the kids are the ones who are going to be the stewards of the planet eventually. So I don't really know where all this outrage comes from.
Yeah, I don't know. Now we're going down. This is, I think, the most specific critiques we get. So this is your biggest worry. Lol, yeah, because your findings would have been so generalizable with just a few more ladies taking selfies in the woods. So I don't know much about this study, but apparently they're just pointing out the limitations of the study.
That's which is good scientific practice, actually, right? So you can, in your article, if you have problems, not mention them. But you know what? When other people replicate your work, they're going to have problems, right? So it is in the interest of the knowledge, production of knowledge, that you own up to and admit to the limitations of your study so that other people are aware of them. And maybe they do a study where they don't have that limitation because they don't have the gender balance. And then they can reference your study and see whether or not that this imbalance actually affected your results. So yeah, you're mocking them for being honest, or they're just mocking them in general. Again, but it's just for the lulz. It's a lulz account. It's not a...
Well, and again, this is, our previous example was they didn't like somebody because they were interested in Marx or they were interested in giving better education to Black people or based on race or looking at how those inequalities were working out. This one, they don't like the idea that people would actually say, the problem with this study is we had a bunch of dudes and not a lot of not dudes. So we can't really say that the not dudes of the world would have done the same thing. Like, because sometimes there are differences. And that's why you don't just have men in your studies. This is like I think they started figuring this out in 1950s. I could be wrong. Like, oh God.
I'm very skeptical of evolutionary psychology, and it's not a blanket thing in that I reject it all. But when I look at a study, I'm very interested to see whether or not it was really falsifiable. So, for instance, if you give me an EvoPsych study that tells us apparently that men prefer boobs to butts,
Mm.
I want to know, what if you would have found that men prefer butts to boobs? Like, how have you falsified that theory? Like, if I, what is the, so you're saying, there's this rationale of why men like boobs better than butts, but what is the opposite? Like, how would you know if you were wrong? If you can explain both accounts with your theory, and they both get you to the same thing, that you're explaining men's behavior, but just different focused parts of the body, you're not really making it's not a risky theory. And so for me, I think if I were to do something like this on EvoPsych, which I wouldn't because I don't care enough about it, I'll just read studies on my own and question that and keep it in the back of my mind. That's enough for me. But if someone had a boob butt thing and I had a problem with the way that they set it up, for instance, I didn't see their null hypotheses. What were their null and alternative hypotheses? How would they know, right? That's what I would put in the tweet. My objection.
Yeah.
My substantive objection that goes to my problem with EvoPsych that doesn't really, that, you can't really falsify that there's so is it more Adler and Freud and Marx, and that you can explain a lot of things with EvoPsych, or is this an actual sort of like really narrowly defined, very precise result that you're telling me about? If you're not doing that, you're just a little account, in my opinion. And I'm not seeing anything in here that shows me they're engaging in the way that Gary promised. You lied, Gary. You lied. You said that they were doing good stuff, and we've been looking through, and we can't find good stuff.
So, and this one is just weird. It's the last one I'm going to bother with because I'm just going down the list here. If there's some wonderfulness, it's not popping up yet. You show me the wonderful stuff. Go ahead. Dig through their back catalog. Maybe there was a time when they were doing just brilliant work. But here they're saying scientists discover that runners take selfies too. But I believe they actually told them to. So it's not that they discovered it, they asked them to. Like, I'm not understanding this.
So actually, can you scroll down any more to see if there's any more? Do you know any more information? Like, did they put the link to the article or anything? Because obviously this little way that they have it, it's a subsection of of an entire article. So you're talking about 4 lines in a 7,000 word document, and we have no idea what the context of this is, right? So yeah, this is actually one thing that social scientists will do, that they will give people maybe not give them phones, but they'll ask them to put into diaries or to take pictures of themselves or whatever else, things that are important to them or the times that they do it. And it's psychology. You're doing a social science where you're asking the participant to help you get the data that you need. And I don't understand why that is being mocked. I mean, I would very much like to see the title of the study and read the proper abstract.
They probably have it somewhere.
Normally they do.
Like
they just like showing the pictures of the photos as if somehow.
Again, gender binarism is problematic.
Yeah, that's
all right.
That's a good reporting thing. Oh wow, they feel like vomiting now. So highbrow. Hashtag big data. Oh wow, they know the lingo. And anyone who doesn't know what big data is, I don't see anything now with the link for that article.
It might be. Could be down there. They don't usually do this
without one.
Many.
Oh yeah, they're still doing photo-based tourism. Yeah. Oh no, I think you slid up a little bit. That's okay. Yeah.
All right. This might be a different one.
Right. Maybe they didn't. But as you said, if they're giving people cameras to see what kinds of things that they photograph themselves in front of, Again, that's a psych issue.
Oh wait, I think this is it. I think this is the abstract. Sports events that depend upon natural landscapes tend to draw athletes from urban centers to peripheral areas. In doing so, these events function as tourist attractions, but little is known about the way participating athletes understand these places. This study explores the way that one type of sports traveler, an ultra marathon runners, understand the host destination in Canada as a place of training and competition. A volunteer employed photography data collection method was used along with inductive thematic analysis.
Okay, should I explain what that is?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah. So inductive analysis is pretty much what it says in the tin. You take all of the data and you look for patterns. And you look to see the ways in which things could be grouped together. And you don't, if you're doing it without any theoretical framework, the idea is to actually be led by the data. So in this case, you could put out all of the pictures in front of you and look, which ones were taken on sunny days versus cloudy days, which ones were taken near things, which ones were with more than one person, and just sort of rearrange them again, right? Group them over and over and over again. And eventually you start to see that there's certain characteristics that come together that you can kind of lump the data into. And those are the patterns that you kind of probably suspect might be happening in behavior anyway. And so it's a very grounded up data-led process that then informs theory. You use that then to get an idea. How can you explain what you've just observed here? So now, yeah, do you want to talk about the 4 themes that emerged?
Yep. Landscape, sport competition, community, and introspective self-portrait. So that's what they found. Under the landscape theme, runners saw a place as sublime nature during the training camp and a terrain to be conquered during the race. Second, the sport competition theme reflected place as the event, with the competition being the filter through which all other aspects of the setting were understood. Third, the setting was characterized as a place of community that fostered social connection and celebration. And finally, the introspective self-portrait theme focused on the runners themselves as they centered their identity within the setting.
Now, I should say, being a person who writes these types of papers, I'm going to tell you that those 4 themes that they introduced above, that didn't just happen randomly and they put them down in the order that they found them, right? They very deliberately constructed the first sentence that she read out to mirror the second one. In other words, they're building up, right? They found these patterns and they already know they're going to try, they have an understanding of why they think they grouped in this way. And so they present them to us as the reader in the same order each time. And look at how they do it, right? Landscape, competition, community, introspection. And then they say, first it's the wide open space, right? The places where they are actually experiencing and the views they have and what the terrain is going to be like. And then it's all framed within this sports competition, right? So that also becomes part of their experience that they're documenting. But another key part of being in this event is other human beings, right? And so they take pictures of themselves with other human beings. And actually, this is the part that I find interesting. People also want to do self-portraits. So they want to ask, they want to capture the landscape, the event, the people they were with, but then they also want to remember themselves there. That I think is actually really interesting if those kind of patterns emerge. And again, we're seeing maybe some gender tilt because more men participated than women. So would we, in a bigger sample, see more women focusing on community pictures and self-portraits? Or would we get different kinds of self-portraits if we had a wider sample? I think these are all, this isn't terrible methodology, depending on what the research, and I don't know, maybe this is a marketing for outdoor advertising journal. I don't know where this journal is, so I don't know who the audience is for this research.
Let's see if I can find out.
Because they cut all that off. I mean, they do provide it in the link, but it's an important piece of information to understand what you're looking at. Otherwise, it's like being
Journal of Sports and Tourism.
Okay. Mic drop. Boom. Gary, you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, the one thing, if I'm Steel Manning, it is a small sample, right?
Yeah.
Like you would want, it's like, I think they said 11 people. You would want this to be done more. You would want other people to come along and come up with bigger samples and do a bigger study. And you would probably want to look at different things about these marathon runners. Do they come from all over? Are they just from one group? Like, all that sort of thing. But this doesn't mean that this beginning that they've put out there's anything wrong with that. It's a beginning. I don't see
why it's so offensive.
Yeah.
Can
Well,
you just ask a favor? Could you scroll down a little bit? Because I'd like to know what the people who wrote this, and what like their departments are, institutions or things like that. It might be kind of, sometimes it's with the authors, but.
So there's Tom Hinch.
Yeah.
It was supported by Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council grant under the Insight Development Grant Program.
That sounds like an economic thing. No, I guess maybe go back up. I was just looking for anything that says more about the authors, because sometimes they'll say what their institutions are. And,
all right,
here we go.
Tom Hinch, Faculty of Physical Education and Recreation, University of Alberta.
Okay.
All right. And yeah, Faculty of Physical Education and Recreation.
Those damn health science people. They just use all this ethnography to undermine real scientific research.
Yeah.
I say, like, in some ways, like sort of photography, autoethnography, as it were.
All right. All right. Well, let's see.
I think that point has been made.
Yeah, I can't. Now I'm going to try and turn this off. Hang on.
Well, are we going to go back to Gary?
Yeah, let's go back to Gary, because we'll never get through this.
No, yes. I do have I've got 4 hours till my train, but.
All right. So if you want to put up the thing again.
A photo, yes. Oh, yeah, because then we're going to get to the real good stuff. All right. Yep, I've got the photo up. So, and you're sharing with me. Okay. Yeah, so I'm on. Oh, no, I touched it.
Oh, yeah. One quick thing about that other thing is that, when he talks about the unusually high proportion of STEM professionals among its followers, first off, that doesn't make this good episode.
Yeah, that's called ad hoc fallacy, I think, right? Oh, well, yeah, it's got a lot of followers, and then so it must be right. I mean, it just strikes me as really poor reasoning. And also, what's a lot? I mean, and how does he know their ideology? Citation needed.
Even if, let's say, they have their 80% STEM. Let's say something crazy. That could be because they're making fun of things that are STEM. Whereas other people might be less interested in laughing about that sort of thing, might not be even in on the joke to that part. That's not something they're interested in. So they don't want to look up jokes about it in as much as they even have jokes. Like, you know what I mean? So
jokes, you're being so generous. Jokes is such a generous.
It was pretty, I think I'm steel manning now. Now I'm being nice because now I'm starting to feel bad.
Why?
I don't know. But
he can rise and fall on the strength of his arguments, and they can too.
Yeah,
and they can too.
But there's a sort of appeal to authority that goes on there. Like, well, if scientists like it, it must be good science.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. All right.
If you don't like what most of the people who are scientists like, then you're the not scientists. You're the true Scotsman. Kind of.
Yeah. Like there could be like 10 science-y type people who like it and 100 that would say this is garbage, but no, it's, Anyway, on to the third. Finally and inevitably, she accuses Real Peer Review of conservative propaganda, even though it's plausible that left identitarian theory gets the most attention because that's where the lion's share of the corruption is.
A citation needed. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. You're defining corruption as the things you don't like. So it is inherently, by definition, corrupt. Sorry, I forgot we were doing tautologies tonight.
These days, there's probably more ideologically motivated social theory masquerading as science than there is creationism or climate change denial, especially in the registered journals to which seats of higher learning are likely to subscribe. Satirizing incompetent progressives is indeed of use to conservatives who are naturally going to milk it by overgeneralize to everyone on the left. But the folly here is, I'm sorry, it is small print, so
you know what?
I'm
Okay,
squinting at it.
I can do better if you want. But the folly here is that those who aid their aid their political opponents by trying to pass off junk as authentic research, like in the Journal of Sports and Tourism, as not as Kristiosity suggests, those who satirize such efforts. The best advice to progressive social researchers is, if you don't want to take on the flak, do proper science, not what passes for science in right-on quarters of the arts and humanities. The conservative mockery will reflect badly on conservatives. Then conservative mockery will reflect badly on. He's giving us advice. If only we were more like the conservatives, then we wouldn't be mocked so much. So can I pull out? Sorry, I'm just like, oh, these days, there's probably more ideologically motivated social theory masquerading as science than there is creationism or climate change denial. All right, social theory is a theory, right? It's not, you apply social theories and you use the scientific method, right, to study a theory and social theories. And if what you're doing is empirically based and you're looking at theories and you're doing induction and deduction and correspondence theory, which Gary always loves to remind me about, if you're doing all the things that count for science, why would your research, just because you're using a social theory that some people don't like, suddenly stop being science? I don't see where the definition of science is like that in the dictionaries or encyclopedias or even in science, like how to science books. So, and again, this sort of like, he's passing off junk as authentic research. Look, just because you don't understand the research doesn't mean it's junk. And there might be some junk in the research, but you're passing off maybe really good research as junk. And that, I think, is a more dangerous position. It's a false positive. You're getting rid of things that actually have value because you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I don't see how that's being a good knowledge producer, which is the goal of science. And I mentioned this. Did I talk about the Wissenschaft thing? I know I talked about it at least once.
No.
Right. We are bound up by how we think about the world, in part by the language we use. And science in the English language has historically been associated with the natural sciences. And when we started to do science in the human fields, we called it social science. And therefore, there's a sort of like link between the approaches and the values and the perspectives of the people who did the natural sciences being imported. Basically, you can just say, brought over to study human beings. But in German, the word that we would translate as science is Wissenschaft. It means, like knowledge. And that means that it's not defined by a certain naturalistic method of doing science that is based on a certain value system that was established in the Enlightenment and worked really, really well for rocks and stars and big things and little things that aren't people, right? But when we want to understand ourselves, then we have to look at the various ways in which human beings create data, if you want to say it, from how are the ways that we are generating art and speech and writing down our thoughts and creating music and talking to each other and telling stories about things and all of this stuff. You can't just use a microscope to do that. And you have to get deep, you have to kind of get dirty, you have to get into the data, and that means talking to people. So again, the idea that if you're talking to people and people are giving you information about their lives, like at how people use cameras at sporting events, right? I don't see how that's what do you call it? Junk. It's junk research. And Gary is great for speaking beautifully and using like really lovely language and often some kind of Byzantine constructions of stuff, and all of it is wonderful magic to make you not notice he's not citing any numbers. He has no citations. He's making a lot of claims, but he's providing no evidence. And I think, as we would all agree, we all know that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And I've seen Kristiosity's evidence. I've not seen Gary's, and I'm not really impressed with the evidence I've reviewed from real peer review.
Right.
And so that was my little bit.
I think I want to address that this is not conservative, because I think it's pretty obvious that they have a conservative bias. And it's not just, yes, there's the the papers that they choose, but there's also the way that they choose to attack those papers. You know, if you're coming at it from a position of somebody talking about racial justice in the education system, and you're saying, yikes, if you're talking about a Marxist educator, and that's something you don't like, if you're talking about other things that I brought up in my video, um, you're calling people snowflakes because they think that they are, well, how did they put it exactly? Like their health is important to them, or their wasn't health, it was like their internal system, some internal system of health or something. I can't remember what it was important to them. That doesn't make you a snowflake. But when you start to put these things together, it's pretty, like, you get an obvious pattern here. They don't like trans people. They don't like people talking about racism under, you know, or racial or gender differences. That sounds pretty darn lefty. Like, no, that's obviously I don't understand. I honestly don't understand how you could go through these people's output. You know, and unfortunately, now I've had to look at a lot of it.
I'm sorry.
And not come to the conclusion that it's conservative and right wing. It's obviously so. There doesn't seem to be any evidence against it. Like, I see nothing other than them saying that they also don't like Jordan Peterson at some point, you know, in talking to me. Okay. But there seems to me to be a very clear bias in what they choose to mock, the way they choose to mock it, you know. And like I said, some of these things that we look at, there's nothing wrong with them. And that was one of my points that I made in my original video, and that's one of the points I've got to make now. There's nothing that I can see that is wrong with some of the things they choose to mock. You know, Gary can say that that's a mistake. It doesn't look to me like it is a mistake. It just looks like standard practice. They like to mock certain things. I don't know why. You know?
Well, should we go over the little piece of evidence I presented you with earlier today?
Yes. Go for it.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a researcher, so I do research. And as somebody who gets followed on Twitter, one of the ways I decide whether or not I want somebody's account to follow me, and yes, I screen pretty much everybody who follows me at this point. So if you're still getting my tweets, it means you've been screened or I haven't caught you yet. But I will look at what people like. I will look at the things they've retweeted. I will look at who they follow, because I want a profile of who's going to be following me, because if it's just going to be some person who's going to throw hate at me, soft block. And so I did this for real peer review. And do you have the images?
Yes, hang on.
So what I did was I went to their account and I just had a little nose around, because it's all public and stuff. And they don't follow that many people. They have quite a lot of, they have way more followers. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head because I didn't really pay attention. I was looking at who they followed, because who you follow is what you see in your Twitter feed. And so it's your bubble. And the wider and more diverse that bubble is, then the more views that you get exposed to. And there's a lot of people in Twitter that I don't want anything to do with. And so I don't follow them. My Twitter space is what I want to look at, you know? So we can get a sense of what they're looking at when they go onto Twitter. And now you got them ready? Did I fill enough time?
I think so.
Okay.
Share. And all right, so
yes.
I don't. All right, so go ahead.
Actually, I can't really see, so you'll have to kind of. There's some people I don't know, but the people I do recognize are all right-leaning.
Gad sad.
Yeah. Because you want to be on top of every tweet he's got, every thought in his head.
Let's see. Uri Harris, political centrist. That's another way of saying. We all know the darn centrists. Anyway, sorry. I shouldn't say that. I'm sure he's delightful.
Yeah, I think if you move, I don't know if it's right or left, but there was like a few of them.
Christina Summers,
Yep.
SJW Nonsense.
Yep.
Let's see, Tony Erickson, who's for pjmedia.com, free speech. Let's see, IFL Science, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of read through if you want to go to the next one.
Richard Dawkins, James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian. We could have a whole conversation about that. Claire Lemon, who is the founder and editor of Quillette, which is libertarian leaning sort of thing.
So. Oh, by the way, your mic went off by a little bit. I don't know if you want to adjust it so it's a bit closer to your mouth. I didn't realize it'd be that complicated.
Okay, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
So,
yeah. But also, there's some people that follow them though that were so hilarious. I don't know if you have to go back, but there was one account that was basically like a duplicate account or an admirer account, and they had a great tagline. I think I don't know if you have to go back to the beginning in the other direction, but it should be.
All right, so Ravi.
No. Can you go? Sorry, keep going to the left one more. Is that? Yeah, these guys.
Oh, okay.
Read what they've written about themselves. Just read it.
So, PAL Review, continuing the work of real peer review, exposing the useless and the postmodern in peer-reviewed and publicly funded academic output. And they've got weird screenshot from Weird Science with the guys with the bras on their head, if you happen to have seen that classic movie that we should all see.
So I would just say, yeah, that's, classic. Definitely. I remember that. But now I'm all distracted with like the Weird Science and the big blob. Anyway, but what I found fascinating about this was how honest they were.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think we're on pretty firm ground.
Pretty sure. Oh, and you just wanted to say people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Did you not also want to just...
yes. Well, I mean...
Take 2 minutes.
So, people sometimes do hoax papers, right? There was a hoax paper that went out, and it was a biochemistry paper from a guy who writes for Discover magazine. And it was about midichlorians, Star Wars midichlorians, and their effect on on people with diabetes. So, and that was picked up by 4 different journals. These are all pay-for-play journals, right? So let's see if I can get it up. I had it.
Yeah. Now, these guys are going after what they think is a waste of taxpayer money by funding research that could, I don't know, improve the economy or whatever, help people understand how they relate to themselves in competitions or whatever. But the pay for play is just literally, if you pay enough money, you can get it published. And then it says it's in a journal. And most people, there's so many journals, you can't possibly keep track of a dodgy one here or there, right? And so that's the problem with and I would just want to say that the peer review guys always sort of link to the journal article, but in terms of criticizing the social sciences or social theory or particular methods, this is a good lesson.
So I want to read from the paper that was, again, accepted in 4 of these journals. Midichlorians mediated oxidative stress causes cardiomyopathy in type 2 diabetics. As more fatty acids are delivered to the heart and into cardiomyocytes, the oxidation of fatty acids in these cells increases. Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? I thought not. It is not a story the Jedi would tell you. So yeah, and yet nobody comes out and says, damn, that those
Yeah.
chemists, they're fakes, they just people know when it's stuff like that. They have their brains on. They know that, okay, there are problems. There are definitely problems. They're huge problems. There was also the case of the people that just wrote to predatory journals where they said, get me off your fucking mailing list over and over again. And that was accepted.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like, there's,
can't say academics don't have a sense of humor.
yeah. And it's just, so there are these ridiculous problems that are going on, and there's a lot of different reasons for them. And we also have Peter Boghossian and one of the other people that they subscribe to were
Christina
the
Haas
ones.
Summers.
Or
I
is
don't. Else? No, not her.
I think it was James Lindsay.
Oh, okay.
Who wrote a paper called The Conceptual Penis, and this was put into. They actually published, I think, in Skeptic magazine. So they made this hoax paper. They got it rejected by the first journal they sent it to, but the journal that they sent it to suggested they could pass it along to this pay for play journal, which they did. And they got it published and called it like
they duped
this incredible takedown of all of social science and all of gender studies and everything else. And it's nonsense, right? And, in fact, I think Thomas Smith did, as I was doing some of the more research, he did an interview with James Lindsay where he went through, and one of the things that James Lindsay said, because Smith was like, look, you can't draw this conclusion from what you're talking about. You can't say that gender studies, because you got a bad paper in a pay for play journal, that doesn't make gender studies bad. And yet all these supposed skeptics are going, yeah, you got them. Like, and he says, well, look at real peer review and you'll see just how bad the problem really is. So that's why like that was his job. It's just garbage.
They cite each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Just, ugh.
So yeah, if you're going to go to real peer review for fun, I would say click on their link, because to their credit, again, they always provide the link to the article. Look at the name of the journal. Look at as much of the article as you can get a hold of. Sometimes if you go on like research.net, or you just put the title of the article in, you can find a working paper, or you can find a draft version, or you can find an offline a version that you don't have to pay for. Maybe like a proofs copy or something. And just see, match up their comment to what the paper was really about in context of like the audience and the theories used and the findings and the methods and all of that, and see whether or not they've done a good real peer review, or have they just been lazy and flippant and relying on stereotypes to get attention for themselves. Oh, wait, did I answer my own question?
And yeah, I mean, go ahead and look at this if you want to, and fine.
Please do.
I just honestly think that the big problem I have is this does they are tarring social science with this brush, right? And it's not fair, and they're not doing a good job. And I see no evidence that they have ever done a good job, So like, why am I? All right, I'm just frustrated. I don't think people who call themselves skeptics should be supporting these people, because they're anti-science, and yeah.
Or anyway. At least they're anti, let's say, certain types of methodologies for knowledge production. And again, not every single study that's going to have a particular, interpretive approach is going to be a great study. But if some studies do provide some really interesting ideas or insights or ways of thinking about parts of history or political phenomenon in ways that you hadn't considered because you hadn't put those pieces together. And it's relevant on an academic level. This isn't just like an opinion piece written on a blog, right? These people have to locate their research within known theories and other authors and other interpretive takes, and they have to explain how theirs is different and what it adds to the literature. And it's not like the social science and the natural sciences. If we eliminate all of the things that they are offended at that get funding, suddenly the natural sciences will just get a whole bunch more money. I really, obviously you said, what is their problem? And when you unpack it and you get deeper down and you unpack their objections and their defenses and you realize that there's nothing there, you just hit ideology. It's just the rock bottom of what you hit when you actually unpack their arguments and look at whether or not their claims can be substantiated and whether or not the counter evidence actually overcomes their objections.
All right, so I'm going to read his last paragraph. All in all, I think real peer review is a potential force for improvement, and I would recommend it to anybody who doubts that ghostish nonsense is a thing. I don't know what that is. Gauchiste nonsense. It sounds French.
It's a Byzantine language.
Christiosity's video, on the other hand, is not good criticism, being itself everything it accuses real peer of being, but with the ideological polarity reversed. Look, Gary, that's an insult.
I'm just going to summarize that last paragraph for you in one sentence. Ready?
Yeah.
I know you are, but what am I?
But listen, people who come here know that I'm a leftist. They know I'm a feminist. I'm not hiding anything. The things that I accuse real peer review of are things I clearly don't do. I accuse them of sort of hiding their bias, of not being specific in their criticisms. I think I've been incredibly specific and telling you right away, this is my political lens that I'm looking through life in. I don't think I needed it for this particular crap because it didn't require that much thinking. But it's still like it's there. Like the things that I say are there. I'm not trying, and I'm not anti-science. I'm not anti any kind of science. So tell me, these were my actual criticisms of real peer review. Tell me which of them you think applies to me and why, and demonstrate that. Or else do not compare me to these crappy hacks. And hey, dude, I am funny.
Yes, you are. And sassy.
And sassy. And I got more to say than just lol. So don't even start with me.
Yeah. Yep. No, and this is it. I approach this from, as a social scientist, when I look at real peer review, what I would expect is some kind of summary that would efficiently tell me the precise thing in their abstract that I'm looking for and why it's a problem. And they only point out the problem, and they leave it up to the person to interpret what the problem is. I mean, sometimes obviously like yikes and neutral, there's all this framing that goes on, sort of well poisoning in some ways, or at least a deliberate framing in order to prepare you for how you're meant to react or interpret what you're being presented with. If you were like real peer review, this video would have consisted of you and I going through their tweets going, lame, as if, and that would have been it, because that is all they do. That's all they do.
So, there.
So I think we put this to bed.
Yes. I do want to just, because this was so funny to me. One other thing I want to read. Hang on. It was just, and some of the people who commented had better criticisms or smarter criticisms. I'm not going to say that this was that I'm going to put out there.
It's not a representative sample, but it certainly is a collection of critiques that you can deal with and overcome efficiently by reading one person's critique or two comments or two people's comments. It deals with a lot of the big issues.
So let's see. Gonna go down. Where was it? Got a lot of Sputicus Maximus.
Great.
Says, you gotta be shitting me. You're really going there? My God, 5 minutes into this vid, and my mouth is hanging open at the nonsense you're stating. And then later, he says, dude, you've screwed up so much. I'll be making a video response to this idiocy. Now, because there's a lot to read, seriously, I have to read some troglodyte's 200-page dissertation on effing anecdotes of all things. This is going to take me ages to script, respond, and refute, but you've screwed up really, really badly. So,
maybe pick a different example. Maybe don't pick the 200, or are you limited to the one ridiculous example in order to make your video? Because if she's wrong, you should have a whole bunch of examples to choose from. You should be able to do 3 things in that time if you really wanted to do it well. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't even recognize what he's talking about in this 200-page dissertation. Sputicus, I'm glad that you're invested and you're ready to go to task. I do not promise to watch a super long takedown.
Also, sorry, you go ahead.
Because it doesn't seem to me that you're approaching this cleanly. You've already decided the guy was a troglodyte who should never have written about anecdotes in the first place before you've even started. So, okay, why don't you just say then he's a troglodyte. He wrote a 200-page dissertation. Done. That's your attitude going in. Just saying. All right.
One more thing. So I had to advise students on essays for a very long time. And if this was a student coming to me with an essay structure, I would point out, you watched Kristi Winter's video. Within the first 5 minutes, you had a lot of objections to what she was saying about real peer review. So how does reading a dissertation that is not written by real peer review challenge her arguments in a coherent way?
So, we'll see.
Something to leave Spud with.
Yeah. We're here to help, Sputicus Maximus.
Yeah, I want you to do that video as well as you possibly can. So answer the question, answer the question, answer the question. Whatever that is that you think she did wrong, speak to that.
Okay. All right. And people can tell me if it's any good and I need to watch it.
Yeah, TLDR, please. Or DTW. Yeah, TW. Yeah, didn't watch.
All right. So I think, is there any questions from the chat before we leave? Because I've barely paid any attention to it.
How many people are watching?
Right now, 54.
Hello, 54 people.
Hi. Love you guys. I can't, I'm very impressed that so many people have stuck with this all about, scientific
nerdy geeks.
Very nerdy stuff.
They probably loved it because they're just as nerdy as we are. So I think hi. No, we said hi. You don't have to say hi back if you have a question. That's what we're looking for, guys. We love you, but come on. You know how this goes now. We say, oh, what's the chat say? And then your thing is, I need to write my question right now because pretty soon it's going to catch up with them. Who is in the chat while you're looking?
Adam Rainstopper, some random geek.
Hey, Jonathan.
Bruce Bartup has a question. Hi, Bruce. Hi, is feminized a defined term? I don't know.
I'm sure that there are a couple different definitions that you could use depending on the context. But I would think that, my off-the-cuff response would be that all of them would have to do with associating things that are normatively considered feminine or female in that society.
Shadrach, no, he's saying he doesn't have good questions. I will not mock your questions. If you have a question that you want to have answered, you just go right ahead. I'm here for you.
Yeah, we already gave advice to a troll, so.
So was Russell Jordan said, did you get like a full essay to review from RPR? No, I don't think they do essays.
No, so well, one thing, yeah, in the tweets they usually do a screenshot and then they link to the DOI, which is the permanent identifier, and it usually shows then the abstract, in full, and then you can use that to see what journal it is and everything else. But they, in terms of providing the articles themselves, a lot of times they're behind paywalls. So they don't provide the free version to the full article that might be available, or even tell you if they've checked to see whether or not it is. That I've seen. Maybe they did once or twice, but I've not seen, from what I've looked at, but,
Bruce also has another question, which is a good question. So this will be our last question. Hey, Bruce, what is the bedrock, the essential of peer review?
I don't know if I could distill it down to one thing because it's an ethos. So this is how I've internalized peer review. Peer reviews are gatekeepers. It's our job to take on the responsibility of judging every line to see whether or not it is worthy of being put out as knowledge from our community. That's the job we're doing. How we do that job depends on the kind of articles we're being presented with. But basically, is it accurate? Is it innovative? Is it new? Does it properly place itself within the literature? Are its methods sound? Are its conclusions accurate to the data? Is it well organized? Is it presented in a way that's coherent, or are there improvements in terms of data visualization that would actually make it easier for other readers to understand it? And so basically you're trying to, even if you're going to, as I said, reject an article, it doesn't mean that people are going to put it in the garbage. If they believe in their work, they're going to put it out again. And if that's the case, then you need to do your job and say, look, these are the things that I would demand of you before I would say, this is ready to be published, and lay those criteria out for them very clearly. So that at least, and the other thing about peer review, sorry. So they know what to do. I'll finish that thought. So they know clearly what the expectations that they fail to meet are, how to meet them, and then, going forward. The other problem is when you have 3 people, you're going to maybe get contradictory advice sometimes. And so then the person who is the author of the article has to, if it's a revise and resubmit, in other words, they have an opportunity to rewrite it according to the criticisms that they've received. This is the process of peer review. And then they write a letter explaining how they've addressed all of our concerns, right? Because we tell them, this is what you need to do to get published. And they go, okay, I'm going to go away and do it. Now I've done it. And this is how I think, this is what you wanted, and this is how I've met your request. And the goal at the end of the day is reliable findings.
Okay.
So sorry if that got a bit long, but it's a process that people I don't think understand, because there's only so many people in the world who actually get to do it. So thank you for letting me wander on. I know we've gone very long.
Okay.
Babylon.
No problem at all. So thank you for everybody for showing up and watching this. Thank you. Bruce says that was a brilliant answer.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you to Kristi for being here and helping out and giving brilliant answers, as always.
Oh, it's a big love fest today. My hangout was a love fest. This is a love fest, as well as being very fun and entertaining. I'm like,
all right. So, and I am, now I have kids coming into my room. So I'm going to just shut it all down. Hang on and just say bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.